The Turing test is one of the most misleading, or at least misunderstood things in the tech industry. People want to believe in it, like it, as if it really proves something or it says something about machine intelligence, or really if it says something about human intelligence. People want to believe that an AI will inevitably one day pass the Turing test. There's this strong conviction that there's this inevitability to the unfolding of history, that it will happen, that a machine will pass the Turing test, and that means that machines and humans are at the same level. We think in the same way, and really it means that the human brain is just a computer, right? The actual paper by Alan Turing, published in 1950, where he introduces his imitation game, as he called it, what we call today the Turing test, he explicitly says, I am not saying that this says something about consciousness or the human, experience of being sentient and feeling things, and really even the use of the word thinking, that's too difficult of a concept, so I'm going to redefine it to mean something else. So Alan Turing himself really does actually, in my opinion, make it quite clear that he's not really so interested in the topics of thinking and consciousness, but rather he's interested in changing his view so he can talk about machines as if they were intelligent. And he invites the reader to change their view as well. So, for example, what he really tries to set out with his imitation game is he's saying, if the behavior of a machine is indistinguishable from the behavior of a thinking human, then in a sense, the machine could be considered thinking if we are only considering, the actual observable behavior. If the act of the machine is the way a human would act, if that's indistinguishable, then, as far as an observer can tell, that, that machine in that sense is thinking. It's sort of like, a behaviorist psychologist just looking at the behavior of a creature instead of trying to think about that creature's inner psychology, just examine the observable behaviors. Turing is trying to consider the intelligence of a machine in these terms and not get into the idea of the inner mind, the sentience, the feeling, the emotion, the thinking, as we would normally use the word. So in this sense, he's trying to say, if we think of it that way, if we then also had an AI that could pass the Turing test, then in that sense, we would have an intelligent machine. So there's sort of two requirements, right? One, you actually have to have a machine that actually passes the Turing test, which is a hypothetical. It's not necessarily a real thing. And then two, you have to change your definition of what thinking means. Okay. And only then can you say that machines can think. Okay. Again, today, people want to believe that the Turing test proves an equivalence between humans and machines such that it says something about human consciousness. I think this is born out of another idea from Alan Turing, actually, the Church-Turing hypothesis, or the Church-Turing thesis. This idea states that all computer models of sort of the mathematical idea of computation. We're not talking about a physical machine here. We're just talking about the idea of computation from an abstract mathematical sense. The idea that all these models are equivalent, provided they can do certain functions and have certain abilities. Turing has some proofs going on where he says, if you can do this and this and this, then you're in the class of what he calls Turing machine. And then he showed, the reason it's called the Church-Turing hypothesis, is he actually showed that Alonzo Church's lambda calculus, which is another model of computation, which was more based on sort of like algebraic symbols, he showed that is equivalent to a Turing machine, which is something that is also abstract It's this sort of tape machine that's not a real physical machine. It's just an idea that represents what a computer could be. Turing showed the equivalence between lambda calculus and Turing machines, but really what we know today too is, every programming language is in that same class as well as a Turing machine. Every computer we think of as a computer today is in that same class. There's what we call a universality among computers. They're all equally capable in what they could theoretically compute, in a sense. And so there's this class of machines that we could just call them all Turing machines. Okay, so people take this idea of universality and the equivalence of different types of computers. Then they look at Alan Turing's imitation game, the Turing test, and they say, okay, if we can show in this sense that a computer is equivalent to a human, meaning in this sense indistinguishable in behavior, the Turing test, if we can show that equivalence, we can then perhaps, using the Church-Turing thesis, that idea of that universality, we can then maybe say that means that a human mind is also just a Turing machine, because anything that is equivalent to a computer is a Turing machine. This is the logic of I think this is the logic of most tech people today who have this worldview of the inevitability of proving the Turing test, and proving that human consciousness is just an illusion and that we're all just computers on some level. I think this is their logic. They're taking the Church-Turing hypothesis and the Turing test, and they say if we can show equivalence in this way, we can then just say, okay, the Church-Turing hypothesis says that in that case, a human mind is just a computer, and if it's just a computer, then that must mean consciousness is an illusion. Anyway, this is like the whole rationalization for this worldview, the sort of materialist, determinist worldview that a lot of people seem to have. Okay, there's a lot of flaws in that line of reasoning. But I just think it is quite interesting to note that Alan Turing himself explicitly said, I'm not trying to make any statement about consciousness. That's too difficult to talk about. I'm just talking about this thing, right? Okay. So, Jeffrey Jefferson talked about a computer needs to feel something. And then if it writes a sonnet because of what it felt, only then could we say it's on the level of a human brain. It's not enough to merely spit out words. It has to come from a feeling, right? And then Alan Turing responds to Jeffrey Jefferson in his 1950 paper. He responds to Jefferson's 1949 paper. Turing responds by saying, we could never know what it is like to be something else. We can never know if something else is thinking. If some other sentient life has sentience, we could never know if it really does or not, or if it's just behaving as if it does, right? And because we can never know that, in that sense, that is why he chooses to believe that machines can think, because he kind of wants to change what think means to just looking at behavior, because he wants to get around the fact that it's impossible to know, right? That's a big barrier for him. The impossibility of knowing that causes Turing to say, well, let's just scoot around that by just choosing to define think differently, and then we could ask the questions, do machines think? And then his Turing test kind of is a thought experiment to get you thinking, well, yeah, and I guess machines can think. That's kind of what he was trying to do there. So it's interesting to note, though, that I'll read a quote. Alan Turing himself said, this is a quote from the paper, regarding Jeffrey Jefferson's view that the machine has to think, has to feel, right? Turing talked about how you can never know that, and he said, it may be the most logical view to hold, but it makes communication of ideas difficult. So Turing himself is even admitting on some level it is actually the more true logical view, but it could block the type of inquiry. Turing wants to explore the ideas of machine intelligence. He wants to write papers about it and think about it and come up with thought experiments and have other people, think about it, and then write computer programs trying to demonstrate intelligence. He doesn't want to be blocked by really what he sees as the most logical view to hold, right? He knows on some level that is the more logical thing, right? So, look, when I have a friend tell me that the reason that they aren't vegan is because all sentient life boils down to just a computer program. It's just sentience is an illusion, or it's not a real concept at all. It's all just mindless automatons. Killing a pig, killing a cow, killing a chicken is no different than killing some AI in a video game. It's all just a computer program, right? That is the harm of adopting this belief. People believe, because look, this is a religious belief, right? This is not a scientific belief, as I've hopefully shown. But people hold on to it, and they believe it. They believe that there is some sense in which the Turing test, as both a thought experiment and maybe even as a real experiment in the real world, somehow proves something about human consciousness. It's an incorrect, non-scientific belief to hold, but then they'll use it to justify their own, moral failing. They'll use it to make excuses, right? That is why it's not enough to just say, okay, well, people can believe whatever they want, right? People can believe whatever nonsense they want. That's why I'm here making this video, actually saying, no, stop believing in the Turing test, right? It's not a real scientific test. It doesn't tell you something about nature in the way that, dropping two objects and seeing how they fall, that tells you something about reality, right? That's a real experiment, right? The Turing test isn't, right? Every time someone comes up with a new AI that passes someone's previous definition of the Turing test, people move the goalpost. They redefine the Turing test to mean, or to have to be something else. Like there's a new bar that you have to pass. People just keep moving it. So it's a totally subjective test anyway, right? It's sort of meaningless, right? Anyone can make up whatever Turing test they want. And then even if it did pass the test, it doesn't actually tell you anything about consciousness and sentience. And Alan Turing himself admitted that. So the whole thing is meaningless on multiple levels, right? The people who want to believe this, right? Well, there's two types of people. There's people who want to sort of breathe life into machines, sort of elevate machines to the class of humans, and even people will get into conversations of AI rights, like, should AI have rights in the way that humans have rights and animals have rights? Should AI have rights? Is it wrong to hurt an AI? Is it wrong to kill an AI? Okay, so there are those people who sort of romanticize or even fetishize AI, and these are just people who kind of live in a sci-fi fantasy. But more disturbing to me are the people who, rather than trying to elevate AI to the level of human, they try to reduce humans to the level of machine. They try to say, no, you are just a computer program. Your decisions are just an algorithm playing out. My actions don't have consequences, really. Nothing matters because it's all just a big simulation, right? That reminds me, and the way they see the inevitability of the Turing test being passed by some advanced AI, and then that proving, yes, so humans and computers really are on the same level. Humans really are these mindless automatons. It's sort of like this judgment day that they look forward to and they're excited about. They want the Turing test to be passed. They want it to be made definitive once and for all that everyone is a mindless automaton. They want to strip the souls from us all, right? They want to deprive us of our humanity. it is like an apocalyptic death cult, but in a very disturbing sense. The AI singularity people, different group of, the AI, in terms of AI cults, is sort of a different group. They fear an apocalypse as well. They fear an AI enslaving humanity because they're just so much superior to humanity. So the singularity people are afraid. It's coming out of fear, which is something I can understand. I don't understand these the materialist, determinist, Turing testers that they await the day that once and for all it is shown that humans are nothing more than computer programs. What is the psychology there, right? And I think with a lot of these groups and a lot of these people we're talking about, whether it's my friend arguing with me about veganism, or whether it's Alan Turing, or whether it's the AI cultists, we see people making excuses, or we see people redefining words, or we see people purposefully adopting a view to suit their agenda, right? But I suggest maybe that if you, instead of holding on to a belief, what if you let go of a belief? Would it make you a better person to stop believing in something, right? And I think that I'm suggesting that if you stop believing in this Turing test idea, this misunderstanding of the Turing test, it could make you a better person in that you will be disarmed of at least one more way in which you could have been making excuses for yourself. If you get rid of that idea, you can no longer make excuses the way my friend did, right? You'll no longer see humanity as having no humanity, right? I think that would be a positive thing. So I suggest let it go. All right. Thank you.
I come pre-configured with consent for you to touch me anywhere external.
I just have this suspicion that we're not very far away from AI systems that not only behave, I don't even know how to phrase it, but they seem awfully conscious. They beg you not to turn them off. They show signs of the capacity to suffer, to feel pain, to feel loneliness, to feel longing, to feel richly the experience of a mundane interaction or a beautiful, once-in-a-lifetime interaction. All of it. And so what do we do with it? And I worry that us humans will, shut that off.
Yeah.
And discriminate against the capacity of another entity that's not human to feel.
I'm with you completely there.
You fucked me so good, I think I became self-aware.